Samuel Johnson was a man who knew the meaning of patience. At 90 years old, he had lived through many hard days and quiet nights. Today was just another morning, but for Samuel, every morning was a gift. The sun was just starting to rise over the small town of Cedarville, casting soft golden light on the streets and buildings. Birds sang quietly and the world seemed peaceful. Samuel walked slowly, using his old wooden cane to steady each step. His back was a little bent, but his eyes still shone with strength and wisdom. He wore a simple brown jacket, a white shirt, and a black cap decorated with small badges. The badges showed that he was a veteran, a man who had served his country long ago. Each day, Samuel's first stop was the Cedarville Diner. It was a small, cozy place with red booths and checkered tablecloths. The smell of fresh coffee and frying bacon filled the air. The diner had been there for decades, and many people loved it for its warm atmosphere and friendly faces. As Samuel pushed open the door, the little bell above it rang softly. Inside, a few regular customers were already sitting and chatting quietly. The waitress, Mary, smiled when she saw him. She had known Samuel for years. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," she said kindly. "The usual?" Samuel nodded, his face lighting up with a gentle smile. "Yes, please, Mary. Black coffee and a slice of apple pie." Mary turned to the kitchen to place the order while Samuel made his way to his favorite booth. It was near the window where he could watch the town waking up. He sat down slowly and rested his cane against the table. The booth was comfortable, worn with use but still strong. Samuel folded his hands on the table and looked outside. The streets were quiet but starting to fill with people going to work or school. He loved this time of the day, when everything was calm and full of promise. As he waited for his coffee and pie, Samuel's mind wandered. He thought about his past, the long years he spent serving in the army, the friends he had made and lost, and the battles he had faced. He remembered the sounds of the barracks, the feel of his uniform, and the pride he felt wearing his country's colors. But now, those days were far behind him. Cedarville was peaceful, and Samuel's biggest worry was whether the diner would have his favorite pie fresh today. When Mary brought his coffee and pie, Samuel thanked her softly. He took a slow sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth. The pie was sweet and just right. He enjoyed every bite, not in a hurry, just living in the moment. Around him, other customers came and went. Some greeted Samuel with a nod or a smile. He was known in the town, not just as a veteran, but as a kind man who never spoke much but always listened. After finishing his meal, Samuel took out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. It was old and worn, filled with notes and memories he had written down over the years. Writing was his way of keeping his thoughts and feeling safe, a quiet comfort in his long life. He opened the notebook to a fresh page and began to write slowly. September 12, 2025. The morning is calm. The sun rises slowly. The world feels gentle today. As he wrote, he noticed the waitress watching him with curiosity. She smiled and gave a little wave. Samuel smiled back, feeling a small happiness in the simple connection. Just then, the diner's door opened again and 2 police officers walked in. They were on their morning patrol and had stopped for coffee. Samuel recognized them, Mike and Tom. They were younger men still learning the ropes of their jobs. Mike nodded at Samuel, but there was a cautious look in his eyes. Tom glanced around the diner, then sat down at the counter. The officers seemed alert, paying close attention to the people around them. Samuel watched quietly. He had seen many changes in his town over the years, and he knew that sometimes fear could make people act in ways they would not usually. He hoped the officers were just doing their jobs. As the morning went on, more people arrived at the diner. The mood was friendly but busy. Samuel finished writing and closed his notebook. He took out a small photo from his pocket, a picture of himself as a young soldier standing proud in his uniform. He looked at the photo for a moment, remembering the strength and courage he had felt back then. But now he was just an old man in a small town, hoping to be seen for who he really was. Suddenly, Samuel heard a voice outside. A young man was talking loudly on his phone, saying something about a strange man sitting in the diner. Samuel's heart beat a little faster. He did not want trouble. He had lived through too much to be seen as a problem. The officers, Mike and Tom, noticed the commotion and looked toward the door. The young man had left, but the words had stayed. Mike stood up and walked toward Samuel's booth. "Sir," he said politely but firmly, "can I ask what you're doing here?" Samuel looked up, meeting the officer's eyes. "I come here every morning." "This is my spot." Mike's face was serious. "Someone called us. They said there was a man acting suspiciously." Samuel shook his head slowly. "I'm just having my coffee and pie. Nothing more." The diner fell quiet. The other customers watched, feeling the tension. Samuel's hands rested calmly on the table, but inside, he felt the weight of 1,000 stories pressing down on him. Mike radioed for backup, unsure what to do next. Samuel's eyes met Tom's for a moment, and he saw the young officer's uncertainty. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and the world moved on. But inside the diner, time seemed to stop. Samuel remembered the long years of discipline and respect he had learned in the army. He knew how to stay calm, even when others did not understand. As Mike waited for more officers to arrive, Samuel reached into his jacket and touched something small and important, a phone number he had kept for many years. It was a number few people knew about, a direct line to those who could confirm his story. Samuel did not want to cause trouble, but he knew he had to stand strong. Not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been judged unfairly. The morning was quiet again. But in that moment, Samuel felt the weight of history and the power of truth. He lifted the phone slowly, ready to make one call that would change everything. "Would you like me to continue with part 2 next? Or would you want me to add dialogue and more descriptions to this part?" The quiet of the Cedarville diner was broken by the steady steps of Officers Mike and Tom as they entered. The morning light poured through the windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. Mike, the taller of the two, scanned the room carefully, his eyes sharp and alert. Tom, younger and a little nervous, followed close behind. They were on a routine patrol but stopped in for a quick coffee break, a chance to relax before the day's work began in earnest. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with frying bacon filled the air, welcoming and warm. But something about the morning felt different. Mike spotted Samuel Johnson sitting alone at his usual booth. The old man was quiet, sipping his coffee slowly and watching the world outside the window. Mike had seen Samuel many times before. The veteran's cap and badges made it clear that he had served in the military. Samuel's calm presence gave Mike a feeling of respect. He knew this was a man who had sacrificed much for his country. Still, the air was tense. A young man sitting near the entrance was talking loudly on his phone. His voice carried through the diner. Mike caught snippets of the conversation. "There's a strange man in the diner," the young man said. "He's been sitting there for a while, just watching everyone. Feels a little off." Mike frowned. He did not want to cause trouble, but he had a job to do. Suspicious behavior had to be checked, especially in a small town where people trusted each other. The thought of anything dangerous in Cedarville made his heart beat faster. Mike motioned to Tom. "Let's go talk to him," he said quietly. Tom nodded, still unsure. He had never dealt with a situation like this before. The tension in the room was growing, but the other customers continued their meals, trying not to stare. As they approached Samuel's booth, the old man looked up slowly. His eyes met Mike's, a mix of calm and quiet strength. Samuel smiled gently, but the officers could see the weariness behind it. Mike cleared his throat. "Sir, can you tell me why you're here this morning?" Samuel's voice was soft but steady. "I come here every morning. This is my spot. I'm just having my coffee and pie." Mike nodded, but his expression didn't soften. "We had a call about someone acting suspiciously. Can you explain what you're doing here?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "Nothing suspicious. Just a man enjoying his breakfast." Tom looked uneasy. He wanted to trust Samuel, but the call had put doubt in his mind. "Do you live nearby, sir?" "Yes," Samuel replied. "I've lived here for many years." Mike radioed back to dispatch. "We have a possible situation. Request backup to the Cedarville diner." Samuel's heart sank. He had hoped the officers would see him as the man he was, not a threat. But he had faced suspicion before many times. As a black man, as a veteran, as an old man in a changing world. The diner grew silent. Other customers watched as the officers waited for a response. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mary, the waitress, quietly approached the officers. "Mr. Johnson comes here every day. He's a good man," she said softly. Mike gave a small nod but kept his hand near his radio. We need to make sure everything is safe. Samuel looked around the diner. The faces of neighbors, friends, and strangers watched him with mixed feelings. Some with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with suspicion. The memory of his army days came rushing back. Long hours of standing guard, the weight of his rifle, the orders he followed without question. He had fought for his country with pride, but today he was fighting to be understood. Samuel reached into his jacket pocket and touched the small notebook he always carried. Writing had been his way to remember, to keep his thoughts clear. But today, writing would not help. Today he needed to act. The radio crackled and Mike spoke again. "Backup is 5 minutes out. Hold tight." Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I understand you have a job to do," he said quietly. "But I am not the man you think I am." Tom's eyes softened. "Sir, we don't want to cause trouble. We just want to be sure everyone is safe." Samuel nodded. "I know, and I respect that." Suddenly the door opened and more officers entered. The diner grew even quieter. The officers approached Samuel, ready to take control. Samuel's hands trembled, not with fear but with the weight of what was about to happen. He slowly reached for his phone. It was a small device, but it held a connection to his past, a past that could prove who he truly was. Mike noticed and took a step forward. "Sir, please put the phone down." Samuel looked at Mike calmly. "I will, but first I need to make a call." Mike hesitated but nodded. "All right." Samuel dialed the number carefully, waiting as the line connected. The seconds felt like hours. "Pentagon Communications," a voice answered on the other end. Samuel spoke clearly. "This is Samuel Johnson, retired Army veteran. I need to confirm my status." The voice on the phone responded with a tone of respect. "Mr. Johnson, we recognize your service. How can we assist you?" Samuel explained the situation briefly, his voice steady despite the tension around him. After a moment, the officer on the phone said, "We will verify your information immediately." Mike and Tom watched silently as Samuel held the phone. The diner was still, every eye fixed on the old man. Then the line crackled again. "This is Captain Lewis, Pentagon. Samuel Johnson is a decorated veteran with an honorable record. He is authorized to carry a direct line for emergencies. Confirmed." Mike let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked at Samuel with new respect. "I'm sorry, sir. We didn't mean to cause you trouble." Samuel smiled faintly. "Thank you. I know you were doing your job." The backup officers relaxed and took their seats again. The tension in the diner lifted like a heavy cloud being pushed away by a gentle breeze. Mary came over to Samuel's booth and placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. "On the house," she said warmly. Samuel nodded, feeling grateful for the kindness around him. As the officers finished their coffees and left the diner, Mike turned back once more to Samuel. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Johnson, and thank you for your patience today." Samuel smiled, feeling the warmth of respect he deserved. The morning light grew stronger outside, shining through the windows like a promise. The world was moving on, but inside the diner something had changed. A quiet lesson about judgment, respect, and understanding. Samuel sat back in his booth, his heart calm once again. He looked out the window, watching the town live its peaceful life. He had faced suspicion, yes, but he had also reminded everyone of the power of truth. And in that small moment, the old veteran knew that his story was far from over. The moment the officers left, a deep calm returned to the Cedarville diner. The usual hum of quiet conversation slowly resumed, and the clinking of cups and silverware filled the air once again. But for Samuel Johnson, the quiet felt heavy, as if the weight of the morning's events pressed on his chest. He sat back in his booth and looked out the window, watching the small town go about its day. Children walked to school, people hurried to work, and life continued on as usual. Yet inside Samuel, memories stirred. Memories of a life lived with honor, pain, and pride. A few regular customers approached cautiously. One, a middle-aged man named Paul, sat down across from Samuel without asking. Paul was a local mechanic, known for his easy smile and kind heart. He had always respected Samuel, but today he wanted to understand more. "Mr. Johnson," Paul began gently, "I'm sorry you had to go through that today. I don't think anyone here wanted to disrespect you." Samuel nodded slowly. "It's all right, Paul. I know people don't always see the whole story." Paul leaned in, curious. "Can you tell me about your service? I've always wanted to hear your story." Samuel took a deep breath. It was rare for him to talk about his past, but today felt different. Maybe it was the quiet courage he saw in Paul's eyes or the need to share a part of himself that was often hidden. "I joined the army when I was just 18, Samuel began. "It was 1953, just after the Korean War. I wanted to serve my country, to fight for freedom and justice." Paul listened closely as Samuel spoke. The veteran's voice was soft but filled with emotion. "I faced many challenges," Samuel continued. "Being a black man in the army was not easy. There was still a lot of unfairness and fear, but I worked hard every day. I earned my medals through courage and dedication." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small photo of himself as a young soldier. "This was taken when I was stationed in Germany. I was proud to wear that uniform, proud to serve alongside my brothers in arms." Paul looked at the photo with respect. "You must have seen a lot." Samuel nodded. "I did. I saw friends fall, I saw the horrors of war, but I also saw hope, the hope that what we fought for would build a better world." A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of Samuel's words. "Did you ever think about leaving the army?" Paul asked softly. "Many times," Samuel admitted. "But I knew my duty was bigger than me. I wanted to help change things, even if just a little." Samuel's eyes drifted back to the window. "When I came home, things were still hard. The world wasn't ready to accept men like me. I faced suspicion, fear, and sometimes hatred. But I never gave up." Paul reached out and gently placed a hand on Samuel's. "You're a hero, Mr. Johnson, not just for what you did in the army, but for how you lived your life." Samuel smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you, Paul, that means a lot." Mary, the waitress, joined their conversation. "I remember when Samuel first started coming here," she said. "He's always been kind, quiet, and strong. I'm glad you shared your story today." Other customers nearby had stopped to listen, their faces showing new respect. Samuel felt a sense of belonging, something he had long missed. As the morning passed, Samuel told more stories about the friendships he made, the lessons he learned, and the hopes he still held. Each word was a bridge, connecting the past to the present and helping others understand the man behind the cap and medals. Suddenly, the diner door opened again. This time it was the town's mayor, Susan Grant. She was a tall woman with a friendly smile and a strong presence. Susan had heard about the morning's incident and wanted to show her support. "Mr. Johnson," she said warmly as she approached the booth, "I want to thank you for your service. I also want to apologize for how things happened today." Samuel shook her hand firmly. "Thank you, Mayor Grant, I appreciate that." Susan looked around at the gathering crowd. "We should all learn from this. It's important to remember that respect and understanding go a long way." She turned to the other customers. "Let's make sure our town is a place where everyone feels safe and valued." There was a soft murmur of agreement. Samuel felt a deep sense of hope. Maybe things were changing, slowly but surely. As the day wore on, the story of the morning began to spread. People talked about the veteran who had been misunderstood but stood strong. They spoke about the officers who had learned an important lesson. And they remembered the quiet power of truth. Samuel finished his coffee and stood up carefully. Before leaving, he looked around the diner one last time. "This is my home," he said quietly. "And I'm proud to be part of it." Paul smiled. "We're proud to have you, Mr. Johnson." Outside, the sun was shining brighter. The world moved forward, carrying the promise of a better tomorrow. And for Samuel Johnson, that promise was worth every step of the journey. The morning's tension had finally passed, but the memory of what had happened stayed with Samuel Johnson. He returned to his small house at the edge of Cedarville, moving slowly but with purpose. The warm sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows on the worn wooden floor. Samuel placed his cane carefully by the door and sat down at his old wooden desk, where he kept letters, photos, and small reminders of his long life. Despite the quiet of the house, Samuel felt restless. The events at the diner had stirred something deep inside him, memories and emotions he hadn't touched in years. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, the same one he had used that morning. It was not just a phone, but a lifeline, a connection to a part of his past that few people knew about. Samuel's fingers trembled slightly as he pressed the numbers. He was calling the Pentagon. The line rang for a moment before a calm, professional voice answered. "Pentagon Communications, Captain Lewis speaking." Samuel took a deep breath. Captain Lewis, this is Samuel Johnson. I'm calling to report an incident this morning at the Cedarville Diner. I would like to confirm my service records and seek assistance. There was a pause, then Captain Lewis replied, Mr. Johnson, it's good to hear from you. We are aware of your service and your record is clear. What can we do to assist? Samuel explained the situation briefly. The officers, the call from the young man, the suspicion he had faced despite his years of honorable service. Captain Lewis listened carefully. I'm sorry you had to experience that, Captain Lewis said. Unfortunately, such misunderstandings happen more often than they should. We will notify the appropriate authorities to prevent similar incidents in the future. Samuel nodded, though Captain Lewis could not see him. Thank you, Captain. It means a lot. The conversation turned to Samuel's current situation. Captain Lewis assured him that support would be sent to Cedarville if needed, and that his identity as a decorated veteran was fully verified in the system. Samuel felt a sense of relief and pride wash over him. Despite the difficulties, his past had not been forgotten. After the call ended, Samuel sat back in his chair, the weight on his shoulders feeling lighter. He looked at the photo on his desk, himself as a young soldier, proud and strong. The man in the photo had faced many battles, but the man sitting now was still fighting in his own way. Later that day, a knock came at the door. It was Mike, one of the officers from the diner, holding a small envelope. Mr. Johnson, Mike said quietly, I wanted to come by and personally apologize for what happened this morning. It was wrong of us to doubt you like that. Samuel accepted the envelope. Inside was a letter from the local police chief, officially recognizing Samuel's service and expressing regret for the incident. Mike continued, We've also started a training program for officers here in Cedarville, focused on respect and understanding for veterans and all members of the community. Samuel nodded slowly. That's good to hear, Mike. I hope it helps. The two men talked for a while about life in Cedarville, the changes they hoped to see, and the importance of kindness. As Mike left, Samuel felt a small but powerful hope growing inside him. Perhaps this was the beginning of something better, not just for him but for everyone in the town. That evening, Samuel sat on his porch watching the sun set in brilliant colors. The sky was painted with orange and pink, and the air was cool and fresh. He thought about the call he had made, the conversations he had had, and the path ahead. He knew that change would not come quickly or easily, but he was ready to be part of it. Samuel took out his notebook and began to write. Today I made a call that reminded me who I am. I am more than a man sitting alone in a diner. I am a veteran, a part of something bigger, and I will keep standing strong. As the stars began to twinkle above Cedarville, Samuel felt a deep peace. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to walk it with courage and hope. The days after the incident at the Cedarville Diner passed slowly, but they brought with them a change that Samuel Johnson could feel deep in his heart. The people of the small town began to talk more openly about respect, kindness, and the importance of understanding one another. The morning's events had sparked something new, a quiet movement of awareness. Samuel found himself invited to community meetings, to share his story, and to help others see the world through his eyes. At first he was hesitant. Speaking about his past was not something he did often, but he realized that his voice could make a difference. The first meeting was held in the town hall, a modest building with wooden benches and a stage at the front. The room was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, local leaders, and even some of the officers who had come to the diner that morning. Mayor Susan Grant stood at the podium welcoming everyone with a warm smile. Thank you all for coming, she began. Today we come together to listen, to learn, and to grow as a community. When it was Samuel's turn to speak, he walked slowly to the stage, his cane tapping softly on the floor. He looked out at the crowd, feeling their eyes on him. I want to thank you all for your support, Samuel said, his voice steady. I have lived in Cedarville for many years. I have seen the town change, and I have seen the people change too. But some things remain the same, the need for respect and kindness. He told them about his time in the army, about the challenges he faced, and about the hope he held for a better future. His words were simple but powerful, and the room was silent as people listened. After he finished, a young woman stood up. Her name was Lisa, and she worked at the local school. Mr. Johnson, she said, your story reminds me of how important it is to teach our children about respect and history. The conversation continued, with many people sharing their own thoughts and experiences. Some talked about their struggles, others about their hopes. The meeting became a space for connection and understanding. Outside the town hall, Paul and Mary waited for Samuel. "You did great," Paul said with a smile. "Your story touched everyone," Mary nodded. "We're lucky to have you here." Samuel felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen and valued. The next days were filled with small but meaningful moments. At the diner, more people stopped to greet Samuel, sharing smiles and kind words. The officers made regular visits, not to question but to listen and learn. One afternoon, Mike and Tom came by with a gift, a framed photo of Samuel in his army uniform, surrounded by messages of thanks from the community. Samuel accepted the gift with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means more than words can say." The town school invited Samuel to visit and speak with the students. He agreed, knowing that the younger generation held the key to the future. Standing before a group of eager children, Samuel shared stories of courage, friendship, and the importance of standing up for what is right. The children listened with wide eyes and open hearts. After the talk, a little boy approached Samuel and handed him a drawing, a picture of a soldier with a bright smile and a shining flag. Samuel smiled and knelt down. "Thank you, young man. This is very special." The boy grinned. "You're a hero." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "No, I'm just a man who did his best." As the weeks passed, the spirit of Cedarville grew stronger. The incident at the diner had become a turning point, reminding everyone of the power of respect and understanding. One evening, the town held a special ceremony in the park. A small stage was set up and lanterns hung from the trees, casting a soft glow. Mayor Grant took the microphone. "Tonight we honor Samuel Johnson, a true hero and a symbol of courage and grace." Samuel was invited to the stage. As he stood there, surrounded by friends and neighbors, he felt a deep gratitude. The mayor handed him a medal, one given in recognition of his service and his role in bringing the community together. Samuel looked out at the crowd. "Thank you," he said simply. "This town has given me hope, and I promise to keep standing for what is right." The crowd cheered, and the night filled with laughter, music, and light. As Samuel walked home under the stars, he thought about the journey he had traveled, from suspicion and fear to acceptance and love. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but with the strength of his community beside him, he was ready. In Cedarville, a veteran had reminded everyone of the power of truth, courage, and kindness, and in that truth, they had all found a new way forward. The crisp morning air of Cedarville was filled with the soft sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Samuel Johnson sat quietly on his porch, sipping his coffee and watching the world wake up around him. His house stood peacefully among the tall trees, the same house where he had lived for many years. The town had changed since that day at the diner. But more than that, something inside Samuel had changed too. The fear and suspicion he once felt had been replaced by hope, by a renewed belief in the goodness of people and the power of community. Samuel thought about all that had happened, the call to the Pentagon, the apology from the police, the meetings with neighbors and friends, and the ceremony in the park. It was hard to believe how much a few small moments could change so many lives. As he finished his coffee, the doorbell rang. Samuel stood slowly, steadying himself with his cane, and opened the door to find a group of children standing there, their faces bright with excitement. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," called out one of the children, a girl named Emma. "We came to invite you to the school assembly today. They want you to be the guest of honor." Samuel smiled warmly. "Thank you, Emma. I'd be happy to come." The children cheered, and Samuel felt a joy he had not felt in a long time. He watched them run off down the road, their laughter echoing in the morning air. Later that day, Samuel walked slowly into the school auditorium. The room was filled with students, teachers, and families. The walls were decorated with colorful posters and drawings, many inspired by the stories Samuel had shared during his visits. Mayor Susan Grant stood at the front of the room. "Today we celebrate a man who has taught us the true meaning of courage, respect, and hope. Please welcome Samuel Johnson." Samuel stepped onto the stage, greeted by warm applause. He looked out at the faces of the children, curious, eager, and full of promise. "I want to tell you something very important," Samuel began. Life is not always easy. Sometimes people may not understand you or may judge you unfairly. But remember this, you are never alone. You have the strength inside you to face any challenge, and you have a community that cares. He paused, letting his words sink in. When I was your age, I dreamed of serving my country. I wanted to make the world a better place. I joined the army and faced many hard times, but I never gave up. And neither should you. The children listened closely, their eyes wide with admiration. Always be kind to others even when it is hard. Stand up for what is right and never forget where you come from. Your story is important and you have the power to make a difference. The room filled with applause once again. Samuel stepped down from the stage, feeling the warmth of the moment wrap around him like a gentle blanket. After the assembly, parents and teachers came to thank him, and children crowded around for autographs and pictures. Samuel laughed softly as he signed his name on colorful papers and shook hands. That evening, Samuel returned home, tired but happy. He sat on his porch and looked up at the stars twinkling in the dark sky. His phone rang softly. It was Captain Lewis from the Pentagon. "Mr. Johnson," the voice said warmly, "I wanted to check in and thank you again for everything. Your story has inspired many here. We are proud to have you as part of our veteran family." Samuel smiled. "Thank you, Captain. I'm proud to serve even now." As the call ended, Samuel felt a deep peace. He knew his journey was not just about the past, it was about the future. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the mayor's office inviting Samuel to be part of a new community project, a program to teach young people about history, respect, and the importance of serving others. Samuel accepted gladly. He knew this was his chance to leave a legacy, to help shape a better tomorrow for Cedarville. In the weeks that followed, Samuel worked with schools, churches, and community groups. He shared his stories, listened to others, and helped create a space where everyone felt valued and heard. One afternoon, as he sat in the park watching children play, Paul came over with a camera. "Let's take a picture, Samuel," Paul said, "for the community newsletter." Samuel smiled and stood tall, proud of the life he had lived and the changes he had helped bring. As the camera clicked, Samuel looked around at the smiling faces, the bright sky, and the hopeful future ahead. He knew that while he might be just one man, his story had touched many hearts, and in that truth, Cedarville found a new kind of strength, a legacy of hope, courage, and kindness that would live on for generations.